What if the brightest smiles in the entertainment industry are not signs of happiness, but shields? What if behind the flawless appearances, carefully styled outfits, and reassuring interviews, two stars were quietly facing moments that changed everything? Tonight, LVT-SHOWBIZ brings you a story that has never truly been spoken aloud, not because it is unimportant, but because it may be too personal to shout. A story about silence, strength, and the invisible cost of fame. Some joys are announced with applause. Others arrive quietly, almost invisibly, because they ask to be protected rather than displayed. In recent months, the public presence of Songyun seemed to soften, as though her life had shifted into a gentler register. There were no declarations, no celebratory interviews, no carefully curated narratives. And yet, something felt different. In an industry trained to celebrate every milestone loudly, this absence was striking. But absence does not always mean denial. Sometimes it signals intention, a deliberate choice to keep a fragile chapter untouched by speculation, untouched by expectation. Not every moment of happiness needs an audience. Some are too personal to be turned into headlines, too meaningful to be filtered through public opinion. In choosing quiet over confirmation, this story suggests that true joy does not always ask to be seen. It asks to be respected. Silence is often misunderstood. In the public eye, it is frequently interpreted as evasion or uncertainty. Yet, for those living under constant scrutiny, silence can become a necessary boundary, a line drawn to protect what remains unspoken. In this context, silence does not indicate weakness. It reflects discernment, knowing when words would invite more harm than understanding, knowing that some experiences lose their meaning the moment they are explained. For public figures, every sentence becomes material, every pause becomes speculation. Silence, then, becomes the only space where something real can still exist. Not everything needs clarification. Not every chapter requires footnotes. This silence asks the audience to slow down, to listen differently, to recognize that restraint can be an act of strength. In a world that constantly demands access, choosing not to speak can be the most honest response of all. Fame often rewards endurance, not well-being. It applauds persistence while quietly ignoring the toll it takes on the body. Over time, exhaustion becomes normalized, and rest is framed as a luxury rather than a necessity. Observers began to notice subtle changes in Shukai, not dramatic enough to provoke alarm, but consistent enough to spark concern. Less energy, a quieter presence, a visible effort to hold himself together. These are not signs of collapse, but signals of a body reaching its limits. The narrative of overwork is familiar in entertainment, yet rarely confronted honestly. Behind the polished appearances lies a physical cost that cannot be indefinitely postponed. When the body begins to ask for rest, ignoring it becomes an act of self-erasure. This is not a story of illness as spectacle, but of listening, finally, to what the body has been saying all along. The entertainment industry thrives on momentum. It asks for availability, adaptability, and emotional output without interruption. There is always another project, another appearance, another expectation waiting just beyond the current one. Within this system, stepping back is often misread as losing relevance. Yet the greater risk lies in never stepping back at all. When productivity becomes identity, rest feels like failure. But this is a dangerous illusion. The industry rarely pauses to ask how much is too much. Instead, it quietly transfers the responsibility to individuals, expecting them to endure what should never be demanded. Burnout becomes private. recovery becomes invisible. This story exposes the cost of that silence. It invites reflection not only on those in the spotlight, but on the structures that keep asking without listening. True sustainability, in any field, begins when limits are acknowledged rather than denied. In a culture obsessed with labels, some connections refuse to be named. They are defined not by public acknowledgement, but by consistency, presence, and shared understanding. What resonates most deeply here is not confirmation of a relationship, but the sense of alignment between two lives, navigating vulnerability at the same time. There are no performances of affection, no statements crafted for approval. Instead, there is the quiet suggestion of support that does not require validation. Presence, in moments of uncertainty, speaks louder than any announcement. It is shown in timing, in choices, in the decision to prioritize care over visibility. Such connections are often overlooked because they do not announce themselves, yet they endure precisely because they are not shaped by expectation. In a world that rewards noise, this kind of quiet bond feels profoundly sincere. We are taught to recognize new beginnings by their brightness, smiles, announcements, applause. But some beginnings arrive quietly, accompanied not by excitement, but by reflection. Change does not always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels heavy, uncertain, even lonely. Yet these quieter beginnings often carry the deepest transformations. They ask for patience rather than praise, for adjustment rather than approval. This chapter appears to be less about moving forward quickly and more about moving forward wisely, about recalibrating life around what can be sustained, not what can be displayed. In choosing a slower pace, there is an implicit rejection of the idea that progress must always be visible. Growth can happen off camera. Healing rarely announces itself. Not every beginning is meant to be celebrated publicly. Some are meant to be lived privately, where they can unfold without pressure. This story resonates because it mirrors the quiet struggles many people recognize in their own lives. The pressure to keep going, the fear of disappointing expectations, the need to protect something personal in a world that constantly demands exposure. Audiences are no longer drawn only to spectacle. They are drawn to authenticity, even when it is incomplete, especially when it is incomplete. The lack of definitive answers creates space for empathy rather than judgment. There is comfort in seeing vulnerability handled with restraint, in watching public figures choose humanity over performance. This reflection feels honest, not engineered. The story does not ask viewers to take sides or draw conclusions. It invites them to pause, to feel, and to remember that behind every image is a person navigating limits. That recognition is what makes this narrative linger long after the screen fades. Thank you for spending these moments with us on LVT-SHOWBIZ, where we believe stories are not just told, they are felt. If you appreciate thoughtful, respectful storytelling that looks beyond the surface of showbiz, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with others who value empathy over speculation. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories to light, quietly, carefully, and with heart. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching LVT-SHOWBIZ.